people ask like, how do I get to do this? How do I get to do that? And I said, look, you got to make your own opportunities in life. You can't sit and wait for someone to like give you a script. You got to go write your own script. You can't wait for somebody to say, here's some money, film something. You need to pick up a camera and learn how to film it yourself. And I think it's easier than ever.
Dad! Brandon, run! Run! Run!
Hey, what's up, man?
Rory, how's it going?
Good. Thank you for having me on.
Hey, I had this background on saved already on my thing. I'm like, you know what? Screw it. He might like it, so I just kept it. I was
Dude, I
doing
love it.
I was
I
doing a
mean,
review of the film for you, so
thank you.
there you go. I kept it. I'm like, oh, didn't take it off, so let's keep at it. How are
Yeah,
you?
I heard you. Good. I heard you had a lot of the cast on.
Oh yeah, I had Harlan, Dean, Sean, Jim. I had half of your film on here basically.
Great. They're all some of my favorite people.
Man, they are all of them was every single one of them has been a blast to talk to, and get to know, and a lot of had some awesome things to share about you and some stories that I'm gonna follow up on. Super cool, huh? Is this your first feature that you've done in terms of like a feature film in that sense?
Yeah. Are we rolling now? Right
Yeah,
now?
yeah, yeah. We're going.
Okay. Okay, cool. Yeah, this is my first scripted film. Now, I've done a lot of unscripted and documentaries, and I've been inching towards this by doing recreations. I would keep figuring out a way to get recreations in my projects. And then I did this one show for AMC. It was called The Secret History of Comic Books. It was a really cool series. And one
Mhm.
of the episodes was about the creators of Superman, Siegel and Schuster, and how they sold Superman the rights for like $130 in 1939. And they spent their whole life trying to get the rights back.
Mhm.
Well, obviously everyone's dead and gone for the most part, and there's no footage really of them. So we did all scripted recreations and interviews with historians for it. And when we did the scripted recreations, I went to Vancouver and we
Mhm.
filmed for 8 days, and it was with the whole crew of the Flash TV series that was on
Oh
the
wow.
CW because they were on hiatus. And there was a another episode of this AMC series that I didn't direct that came in the week before and filmed. So that week, working with all these professionals, and they were just very complimentary about how like efficient me and my DP were, and how like buttoned up and also relaxed and loose and had fun. And I was like, wow, I could do this. Like this was like a little mini movie that we did
Mhm.
for 8 days with scripted scenes with actors, and it went really well. So after that, I was like, my next goal is to go all in, do a full scripted film.
Wow. And obviously you worked on the script here. How long did it take to get this off the ground? I mean, especially a first movie like this. Was this a long-term process for you?
Yeah. So it's a little bit different. So after I did this documentary called The Book of Manning, right? And
Hmm?
I got a manager from doing that film, and he had a script. I told him that I was interested in scripted, and this was like in 2013 or 14.
Oh wow.
And the script was called Mercy Falls. And it was like a very big budget action version of Grace Point. And it was written by Paul Russell Smith, but it was much bigger film. And like a lot of things in Hollywood, it was just in development for a long time. Like different actors got attached to it. We kept working on the script, and eventually it just went away. Like most projects kind of do after a while. They couldn't get the money for it. Well, fast forward to COVID time, and I'm filming in this small town of Laurinburg, North Carolina. I'm doing recreations again. And my
Hmm.
DP says, wow, this town is so cool. Like, we should do a whole film that just revolves around this town. I'm like, yeah, that'd be cool. He's like, hey, you know what? You should take that movie Mercy Falls and set it in this town. And it was like a light bulb went off in my head. I was like, holy shit, I could do this. So I literally, when that shoot was over, I went home and in like 10 days, I rewrote the film from scratch,
Wow.
changed, the premise was similar, a little, but everything else was for the most part different. The dialogue, some of the characters, but everything was in this town. The town was the character, the town of Grace Point. And I basically wrote it knowing what I could get access to, that like we had different, like that airplane graveyard or different spots in the woods, the lake that they have to swim through,
Uh-huh.
all places I knew we could get for free. So that was in like January 2021, and we were filming by June. That's how quickly it
Wow.
happened because I was just so motivated. I don't know. Maybe it was like COVID, and because people were sitting around too, and people wanted to work so bad. So like the end of 2020, I just was like a house on fire.
How'd you assemble this cast, man? I mean, the ones I've talked to are great. I mean, not only are they awesome people, but really good actors and accomplished actors. You talk about, Jim, definitely an accomplished guy. Then you have, Johnny here, obviously son of Rob Lowe here, but accomplished in his own right too. And just everyone you kind of surrounded here too. How did you find them? How did you get in
Yeah,
contact with them, especially not being in that film world in that sense?
100%. It was like 6 degrees. So I had worked with Rob Lowe on a film called I Hate Christian Laettner. He was the
Oh yeah.
executive producer of it. And
Uh-huh.
then we had started a working relationship, and we did a film called Madness in the Hills, which was about the mudslides that hit Montecito. It was a short documentary that we did for Bloomberg TV. And I met Johnny through that because Johnny's high school girlfriend died in the mudslides.
Oh
So
wow.
I met Johnny. We went to have lunch, and he told me he was running late. He was coming from a meeting. And I thought he meant he was coming from like a meeting with an agent or manager. He meant he was coming from an AA meeting. And he had mentioned he just got his 1 year sobriety chip at the time, and he was so proud of it. And then we just formed a friendship. And when I was writing this, I had him in mind because I was like, well, he's in recovery, he's the right age, and I
Yeah.
think he'd be really into doing this. So I asked him if he could do a Zoom with me. I had a project, and I think he thought it was like an unscripted project, but I offered this up. I was like, no, I have a script. And he read it. He hit me back the next day, and he's like, I'm in. And then it turns out that Jim Parrick was his sponsor in AA.
Wow.
Yeah, so they knew each other through that community. And Jim Parrick also acted on 911 Lone Star,
Right.
which Johnny was a writer on and Rob acts in. So then gave the script to Parrick. So then he came on board to play Cutter. And then Parrick was like, are you needing anyone else? He's like, because I know this one guy who I think would be really good to play Luther.
Mm-hmm.
Almost got into a fist fight with an audience member at a play that he was in because the guy was being rude in the crowd. He said, I never saw a guy get so intense so quickly. And that was Sean Carrigan. And then, so it just kept going like that. People would recommend to other people. And I was just really blessed because once people came on board, they took a lot of ownership of everything and they just
Mm-hmm.
wanted the film to succeed. So it came together with a lot of serendipity.
Oh man, that's amazing. Yeah, the stories I heard from everyone in general, there's so many connections here and uniquely, and it just
Well,
fits this movie.
Harlan is a good one too because
Huh?
I think she's incredible. And originally, I had reached out to her manager because I was trying to get this actress that was on Outer Banks. Um, Her name escapes me. She's really faint, like
Oh,
popular.
Madison Klein, maybe?
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
it was right when Outer Banks had come out.
Yeah.
And,
And they film in
and
what? Like North Carolina, right? Wilmington or something?
right, they filmed in North
Yeah.
Carolina and they were shooting season two at the time. So the manager is super nice and we're waiting, and like they're having a hard time just getting her to read the script because she was filming Outer Banks.
Hmm.
And then she's like, "Hey, I have a couple other people, but I have this one girl. Would you want to read her?" And I wasn't that enthusiastic about it. It was Harlan until
Hmm.
I saw her audition, and I was like, "Oh my God!" I was like, "This is the one I want." She was
Wow.
so good, and so that's how that came together. She was just a good, that her manager was really good. That's what a manager should be doing, If one person's not available, offer
Hmm.
somebody else. So
100% hidden gems like that. Plus, I mean, she's worked on Sweet Magnolias. That's a long-going series on, Netflix. So she's accomplished in her own right. But just talking to her, I could see why you'd want her on set too. Not only
she's
talent-wise, but she's just cool and like easygoing and chill.
very much so. Her parents are nice. She's very loyal too because
Mm.
when she was filming Sweet Magnolias, they changed again. We filmed in 2021, so it was like very COVID world
Yeah.
then, and the schedule on Sweet Magnolias changed, and I think they wanted her there to film while we were filming this movie, and she said no. She said
Wow.
she made a commitment. She's going to honor a commitment. Not everybody would do that. So I feel indebted to her, and she's become a good friend.
Yeah, that says a lot about her as a person and just in general, the commitment factor, but also, here you are, a Netflix series calling me back, but she made a commitment to you and honoring. That's how that tells you a lot about her right there.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh man, did you guys film this? I've been hearing story like 3 weeks, under a month, basically. That's wild. It's
19
wild.
days. 19 days.
That's crazy.
And it wasn't like an insane like people running around like with their heads cut off. The key is you just have to prep. You
Yeah.
have to do really good prep. And we did. Like I did three full scouts. The first scout was just to pick the locations. Then we did something called a tech scout where we went with like the art department, the tech crew, and we went through everything, like how we were going to do this, like how long would it take? How long is this going to take to set up? And then working with the production manager and the AD to make a schedule that fit. It's like a puzzle piece, trying to fit everything with the schedule because it has to work for the actors, because certain actors have to leave, but then also what works best for the locations and where we're going to be. So we did that. And then we came out before we filmed. I was out for like 2 weeks before that, just me and the DP, just going through everything, like working it out, like with rehearsing, not rehearsing with the actors as much as just him and I rehearsing, so that when we went out there, like we knew like we were so well prepared that improvising didn't seem like a big deal, if
Mm,
that makes any sense. Like you can be a
yeah.
little more loose when you go in and you show up and you know what you want to do that day. And you have 4 hours, let's say, to do it. Like here's what we have to get in the 4 hours. Boom, 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 boom. And then if we have some extra time, we're going to do this. But we're going to stop no matter what at 1 o'clock.
Mm,
And we just went in there with that. And I think the actors appreciate it. The biggest drawback on a low budget independent film is time.
yeah.
That's the biggest thing. Because if you're making Transformers or Marvel, you can spend a week on a scene and you can get so many options if you want. You could try it 100 different ways. You could do the David Fincher method if that's what you want. And there's certain scenes I wish I had some more time on. But I mean, if you look at like Clint Eastwood, I said this to myself, he does stuff in 2 takes and moves on. And
Hmm.
he's made some pretty good films. So I was
Yeah.
like, if he can do it, I mean, it's good enough for me.
Yeah, I just talked to an actress couple like very recently about who was in juror number two with him and just
I
kind of broke down how he works. It's amazing, at
thought
90
that was a great
something
movie.
too. At 90 some years old, it's kind of amazing how he's got it down.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I've done stuff with Paul Walter Hauser, who played
Hmm.
Richard Jewell. And he told a story like in one of his big scenes where I think he cries. He's like, Mr. Eastwood, could I please could I please get like 5 more takes for this? Like I really want to do this. And he said Eastwood was like, you get 2 more, kid.
I
Like
can see
saying it just
that.
like Dirty Harry.
Yeah,
Like two it is. So no.
amazing. But yeah, that's an accomplishment, Rory, because especially on this, being able to pull it off. Like I mentioned to everyone, it's a group effort. It's actors, it's crew, and everything, and especially kind of figuring it out for the first time. That's looking back, it's pretty impressive, that you were able to complete it and make the movie look good. It doesn't look like a low budget indie or anything like that. And you talk about the locations. I thought I was like a character in this film, man. Because if you filmed this somewhere differently, this movie might feel or is different in that way too. I think that the location is a character too.
That's what we were going for, 100%.
Mhm.
And the director of photography is a guy named Al Francesco, and just super talented. And I met him at the NFL. We started together at the NFL. So I've known him for like 25 years. And a lot of the people that worked on this film were just looking for an opportunity.
Mhm.
And when people, the movie just played in theaters in Charlotte, and I did like talkbacks afterwards because I live in North Carolina and the movie was filmed in North Carolina. So people ask, like, how do I get to do this? How do I get to do that? And I said, look, you got to make your own opportunities in life. You can't sit and wait for someone to like give you a script. You got to go write your own script. You can't wait for somebody to say, here's some money, film something. You need to pick up a camera and learn how to film it yourself. And I think it's easier than ever now to do it because equipment is much more affordable than ever and accessible to people. And you can put it on platforms now a lot easier than you could before. I mean, like when Robert Rodriguez made El Mariachi for 7 or 8 grand, he shot it on film. It was almost like his accomplishment was even bigger than the movie itself, the fact that he
Mhm.
did it. And now, you can do it. It's more accessible. The problem is it's a more crowded marketplace, I think, than ever. And there's way less places to show your film. So, there's always going to be drawbacks. And I tell people, I look at like filmmaking or really any creative endeavor, including what you do,
Yeah.
is like it's like the pursuit of romantic love. If somebody said, "Hey, like, should I fall in love someday?" If a kid said that, well, you say, "Well, you're going to get your heart broken at some
Yeah.
point. It's going to happen to you. You're going to pursue people that reject you, flat out reject you. It's going to really be demoralizing. You're going to think you found the one and maybe you don't find it, but that feeling of falling in love, nothing matches it.
Yeah.
So to me, the risk is worth the reward. I look at it the same as filmmaking or with a creative pursuit, that it's, yes, you're going to face rejection, heartbreak, all of those things, but you keep going because if you can make a film that means something to you, or anything that means something to you, if you write a script that means something to you, or shoot a music video, whatever it is, that feeling of accomplishment just outweighs everything else, at least in my mind. And I think that if you have a heartbeat, you have hope. That's also what I say to
Mhm.
people. Like, because sometimes people come up and they're like, I'm too old. Like, somebody came up to me, this guy, he's like, I'm 45. Like, I work in real estate. I'm like, dude, you're alive. You could theoretically be alive twice as long now that you've lived, or half, whatever it is. You
Yeah.
could live to be 90. So I was like, again, if you want to do it, you just got to do it. Sometimes I think it's more sometimes like dreaming about something like in your mind is actually better than in some ways than actually seeing what happens when you do it, because then there's that feeling like, oh, I failed and I'm a failure. But I don't know. I think it's worse just to not do it. I think
Man,
it's better to just fall on your face, fail. At least you tried. And
100%, Rory. I mean, 100%. Like, people, you mentioned that kind of to love and dating. I'm on a dating scene and stuff, and there's so many people you meet that are, just like, oh, I'm a, kind of like jaded by the past, and I take a long time to open up. And I'm like, here's the thing. If you're not willing to risk opening up and getting hurt, sure, you can get hurt. You're never going to find something great. You could find someone, but it's going to be surface level because you're not going deep with it, right? You're holding back. You're not opening up. Once you commit to fully opening up and risking rejection, heartbreak, again, that's when you're giving yourself the opportunity to find something truly great and make a deep connection. And I think that bears the same way with filmmaking too. It's interestingly you mentioned. I've been putting together. I mean, I filmed it too. I had an idea to do a talk show, right? I felt like, okay, there's something in this marketplace that's kind of missing in terms of talk shows. We have like the Kimmels and all those. Those are kind of older guys for, not intended for like more younger demographics. So I came up with an idea, and it took years to like. I didn't have any experience getting a crew together, financing, all sorts of things that you never think about. You have no experience when you're the talent in a sense, and the creative. And it was 3 years ago that I filmed it, did the sizzle reel for it and everything. And finally, this weekend I'm heading to Miami for a development conference. Right, they're having this conference for all sorts of show developers and all that. So like we're talking about every sort of Netflix, all these sort of gathering in this one conference.
Yeah.
So it was all these years, and I'm like, you know what? I need to make that move to pitch it for myself. It's daunting. I've never pitched to professionals or anything like that, but you know what? I have nothing to lose because I created this, and I'll be damned if I just let it sit, without even giving a shot. I don't know what's going to
No,
happen.
that's well, I've done a lot of work with the UFC before, and
Mhm.
I really like MMA. And I decided after the film to have a fight. I wanted to have a fight
I heard
at,
about it
four-
from
at
Sean, man. I heard
yeah,
about
at
this.
44 years old.
Yeah.
So Sean Carrigan trained me in boxing. We didn't know each other before the movie. Now I consider him to be one of my best friends. It could become really close. Dean Thomas trained me,
Hmm.
and I got like the shit kicked out of me in the first round. And I remember afterwards, I thought they stopped the fight, but it turns out the round was over. But I thought they stopped it. And I remember thinking to myself, well, you tried, that's what I thought in my head. I was like, and you learned it's not for you. So
Uh-huh.
at least you tried. Then I went back to my corner and I was like, oh, wait, it's still going on. I think I was mildly concussed. But yeah, man, I think it's definitely better. And it's a cliche, but I think cliches are true for a reason that it's better to try and fail than not try at all. And you see it a lot with podcasts. Like now everybody's got a podcast, right? But most of them like stop after like 6 months. And that's the
Uh-huh.
thing. It's like, oh, we only have like 50 subscribers and they're all my friends. It's like, okay, well, you've done it for 6 months. You might have to do it for like 6 years or 60 years. Or you might have to just keep going without the promise of results. I think that's the other thing. There's no guarantees. People
Right.
are willing to do like, oh, if I put in all this work on the movie, am I going to make money? Am I going to make lots of money? Or am I going to like be successful? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. Maybe no
Mhm.
one's going to see it. So that's another thing. There's like no guarantees, which can be disheartening.
Yeah.
People
No,
want
it's so
guarantees.
true. 100%. You just got to do it. You got to have conviction, right? And no matter what, be able to kind of handle the end result, and be okay with it at the end of the day. Like whether it hits or it doesn't. And like you said, you tried it, you did it, and that's the peace you have with yourself. I think that's the ultimate thing, because like you're the only sort of one that's going to beat yourself up, down the road. And then once you have peace with it, that you kind of like, I did my best, I took my shot, and you're comfortable with that. That's the best way because then you have no regrets, right? And then you kind of embrace the project more, I guess, in that sense, too.
Yeah, I agree. So I mean, my advice is always to like try to make something.
Hmm.
And also to reach out to your community or your inner circle. A lot of times people reach out to strangers. And I had read this book once. It was like called like the Rule of 100. It was
Uh-huh.
talking about like go within the people those 100 people. And even if I just talked about Grace Point, like I knew Rob, but I went with his son. So sometimes it's sort of like that 6 degrees like of somebody. And then
Hmm.
they ask someone versus just cold emailing. Like I get cold emails sometimes and I respond because I know what it's like to reach out to somebody and I try to be um you know what's the word pleasant or cooperative, but it's like I don't know this person, so like
Right.
why would I just like risk everything for a complete stranger, which is a lot of times what they're looking for. I think you're better off like looking at your family, seeing if they know anybody. I don't know why people are hesitant to do that to their friends, seeing if they know people. Maybe they don't have the support that they want, but or go to your town and see if there's a filmmaking community. I guarantee you, every city in the United States has a filmmaking community,
Hmm.
or has a college that has a filmmaking course you could find. Even if you're if you live in, you know, Nebraska somewhere in a cornfield, you could still find something at the University of Nebraska. There's still going to be a group of people you can convene with. They help you, you help them. You work on their movie, they work on your movie. You form these friendships.
Hmm.
That's what I think is so good about like college, is that you meet the people that become like kind of your circle,
Yeah.
hopefully for, your professional career.
100%. That's well said. I mentioned this to everyone I talked to. I'll put a spoiler update here. That ending, man, I'm telling you, it's the best twist I've ever, and I see a lot of movies. It's kind of my gig, reviewing, seeing movies. It's the best twist I've seen since The Game. I don't know if you've ever seen a Michael Douglas, Sean Penn movie, The
Sure.
Game. And we're talking about early 2000s there. I have not seen a movie that literally had me completely blown away by what had happened. You're investing in a storyline, you see where it's going, and then it hits you, and it completely, then you look back and it all makes sense when you tie it up, where it does. Man, I don't think you realize how you accomplished that twist was so subtle and seamless and yet so powerful. It's one of the best things I've seen in the longest time, man. And it's also, had a good message in it too, a positive message, and a message you can kind of take in inwardly, no matter what situation you're in. But how do you write that, dude? Rory? Because that was epic. It was really epic.
Well, thank you so much. I mean, again, credit to the original writer, Paul, who
Hmm.
that was concept, the story that he had. And I love twists that they're earned. One of my favorite movies of all time is The Sixth Sense.
Yes.
And um, what I liked about that film that I think is comparable a little to this one, obviously there's a big twist, but I feel that if you watch it the second time, you get a different viewing experience than when you did the first time. And also, it's really that film, while there's some horror aspects, you could call it a horror movie. There's this coming of age of the kid in the film and how Bruce Willis's character helps him go along, and there's an emotional aspect, of themes of not fe the fear of the unknown. You don't have to be fearful of things you don't know, and also like learning to forgive yourself with regret. There was a lot of themes in that film told through the lens of horror. So like what I wanted to do is similarly have some big, deep emotional themes, but tell it through the arc of a thriller, not necessarily a horror movie, where
Hmm.
it's not just a thriller, but it's like a coming of age film for this character and this journey he has to go through where he learns about himself. And I think you learn about yourself. You don't learn from about yourself through comfortable times. You learn about yourself through discomfort. And like I know for me, I was just talking to somebody, big development executive, who lost his home in the fires. He lost everything
Wow.
in the fires, and he was, crushed. Luckily, he understands, like, his family's safe, but they have two kids under the age of 5. They have nothing, not even clothes, and they're staying at his brother's house in Texas. And I think, he was looking for something like, has anyone been through this? I'm like, well, I haven't been through a fire, but I did feel like I lost everything I had in my life. When I came home, my house was cleared out. I went through a really bad divorce, and it really like almost broke me, but it didn't. And it made me a much stronger person. And it made me, in some ways, I think, a better person, someone who's more understanding, less judgmental, empathetic to other people more. So,
Hmm.
I wanted to write something where the character's on a journey going through things that are on the surface are bad things, but he's learning about himself. And that's going to hopefully give him the tools to deal with his past that he's clearly not dealing with. Instead, he's, has substance abuse problems. So
Hmm.
I tried to put a little of my own life into it as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many metaphors, like the theme, you visually see him running from these tough guys that are chasing them, trying to kill him, but technically he's running from himself and his own issues too. So there's so many metaphors that you were able to sort of tie in there too, that you look at it from two different perspectives, what's visual, but what's also sort of psychological too, that happens there in so many ways. And like I said, the messages of trust and sort of allowing people into your life and learning to trust them too here with the fathers, especially that whole relationship. There's a lot of aspects and elements you really were able to really kind of drop into this film. And when you look at it carefully and you sort of think about this film, you see it.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I think a lot of the credit is due to the actors too.
Mhm.
Um, a lot of times when I mentioned I did a lot of recreations, and you're not always getting the best of the best actors with when you're doing recreations. Sometimes you're getting non-SAG people or community theater. And when you're around people, I think, acting is an art. It's like an art on camera. They make the words come alive. They're not just reading words, just to be natural. And they actually, to me, a great actor can take what you did and almost elevate it in a way that you didn't think was possible. The same way I have an editor that can do the same thing. Like I'm envisioning one thing, he puts a different twist on it. It's different and better than I envisioned. That's how some of the actors were.
Mhm.
There's a scene with Sean Carrigan's character Luther, and he could have played it so differently than we talked about it in the prison when
Yeah.
he's trying to convince Brandon to kind of join him and come along with him. And then he drops a tear, like a tear comes out of his eye, which like, you would never see a villain do that. And it was so unexpected. And then I think again, what we talked about, it gives a different experience when you're viewing it a second time, like maybe why he did cry in that scene, like why it's affecting that character so much. So just adding these different layers of depth. Um, as a filmmaker, I just learned like you gotta have great actors, you gotta cast your film well.
Mhm.
So it was a good lesson.
100%. Man, like I said, I've been a fan of your work. I've seen so many of your docs. One of my favorites is the Ric Flair documentary. I mean, just phenomenal stuff. Being a fan of wrestling and MMA, so this is cool that you're in that world because I like enjoy these docs and sometimes know these stories, but you're able to tell them in such a unique way and humanize them in so many ways. That's my big takeaway whenever I see your thing. It's like, oh, we see them as these gladiators, performers, but the human aspect of it, you hear about Ric Flair's struggles and all these sort of things, for example, in that doc. Um, how do you sort of connect with these people, especially since you have experience in with these performers in the wrestling element and in UFC? Because you always put out such good stuff when I see your work.
Thank you. Um, well, I think if you went on social media right now, you would think like we're more divided than ever. Like people are so different. And, at least in social media, you don't talk to people that disagree with you or
Hmm.
whatever your politics are. But in real life, when you're actually having conversations, and I've dealt with people from all over the spectrum, whether it's politics or finances or whatever. And I've just learned we have so much more in common that binds us together unless you're like a sociopath or something. But
Right.
assuming you're not, that, and that's what I try to focus on with my films and look at like Ric Flair. He's this crazy, larger than life character, and you see the woo and the styling and profiling. But what effect did that have on like his first wife, who he
Mhm.
cheated on, and then his son, who he actually says in the film that like he could only be home for like a day or two and he couldn't wait to get away. And his son says, you don't have to be that way. And then you see the cost of what he did. He's the greatest, he says it. He says his dream is to be the greatest wrestler of all time. That's how he wants to be remembered.
Mhm.
But he also lost his son to addiction. His son couldn't be Ric Flair. His
Yeah.
son could only be Reed Flair. So, which he couldn't handle that lifestyle. So looking at and giving him some empathy, and then also just looking at like wrestling, a lot of times it's not as much now. It's given a lot more respect now. But when this film came out, this was 2017,
Yeah.
it was still goofed on a lot. It's not serious. It's guys in their underwear, like doing acrobatic circus stuff. And I wanted to show like how much skill is involved in this. And it's sort of like athletic magic tricks, and that they're athletes and how he and why he was the best one. So that's another thing, just the respect for a craft, which I
Yeah.
think most people can relate to. And also, too, another thing I do is I try to look at people's childhoods a lot because
Mm.
all of us were kids at one point. All of us were helpless as a kid, where you don't have control over your situation. Even if you were raised with the greatest parents in the world, if you didn't have that, you wanted it growing up. So there's a lot to, it's the one thing we all have in common. We were all kids, children at one point, whether you have kids later on or not. So I feel like people can relate to that. Oh, I remember what it was like to be 8 years old. Even if they hate remembering it, they're like, I can remember that. So learning about Ric Flair, that like his parents, like, were kind of almost detached from him in a way. He was adopted. So just trying to find those little nuances that
Mhm.
everyone can relate to.
That's cool. I love that you had the UFC guys here. They're legit badasses. So you had
Yeah.
Aljo and Dean and Chris. I mean, it's cool to have, and James Storm too, a wrestler there. But I like that you had these real life sort of badasses here in this movie, and it looked more real, and it came off as like, okay, they are badasses in real life, but if even if you don't know, you see it on screen, and it's cool. These guys definitely have talent, to be actors too. So I think Jim was saying too to me how you place them in scenes with some of the more experienced actors too. I liked how you used the actors sort of, paired them up on screen too, and just in roles here. I think that was really a clever thing to do and really interesting.
Thanks. Yeah. Well, these are just guys that I had friendships with, and I thought it'd be
Mhm.
cool to have them in the movie. And some of them were smaller roles, but like Dean Thomas, he really trained for this role. He took acting classes for almost a year leading up to it. Ever since I told him about it, he's very serious about wanting to be an actor. And I think
Yes, yes, for sure.
I, I think Aljamain, when he retires, could have an acting career. He's very natural on camera. So.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I think if you're a fan of UFC or wrestling, there's some little cameos in it for you.
Really cool. You've worked with Dana before. Is he the guy that we always see sort of on TV and everything? I was curious what is it like to work with Dana and kind of know him?
Mm, he's very genuine, you know.
Hmm.
He doesn't treat anybody that they're above or below him. He talks the same way to a fan, with genuine enthusiasm and intrigue as he does. I've heard him on the phone with Mark Wahlberg. I
Huh.
mean, he doesn't change who he is for anybody, which I respect a lot. And he likes helping people too. He's helped me and he's helped other people. So, and he can be tough. He can definitely be tough. And he's a big ball buster. I mean, he loves busting balls. So you have to have a thick skin, but I think it's done in jest and I really enjoy working with him. And I screened this film for him.
Oh, nice.
He watched the movie. We screened, Dean and I went to UFC headquarters. So just the fact that he would take time to watch the film. He was mentioning to me that he was at the Top Gun Maverick premiere the day
Uh-huh.
before. So the fact that
Amazing.
he sat and watched it meant a lot. So I feel very grateful to work with him and have him be an influence on me.
That's cool. That's cool to have that relationship. And finally, kind of, is there a plan for more? Maybe to do a sequel, maybe with different actors and stuff? I feel like this story could kind of go on and on with different characters. Did you think about a follow-up to this film?
I'm definitely open to anything. I mean, the number one goal is to get some people to see this
Yeah,
film first,
sure.
because, like I mentioned, it's so hard to get just eyeballs on a low budget, just to get it reviewed. Not
Right.
like even a pot, like just watch it and tell me what you think. If you think it sucks, that's fine. Just put it out there. Just
Mhm.
so it's tough with if you don't have a huge name on it. But yeah, I actually wrote out a thing. It was kind of the origins of Grace Point, and it looks at some of these characters started. So kind of this pre-story of Brandon and his father. How did this even come to be in this town? Where you learn about Cutter, his character, and Luther, and how everything kind of originated. So I called it Grace Point Origins, and I wrote the outline for it and everything. So I would love to do it. I think that would be something really interesting to do. Look back at some of the characters and things. So I'm definitely open towards it. And if you want to start leading the
Hey,
GoFundMe,
I'll lead it. Like I said, Rory. I really enjoyed this movie. Genuinely was blown away by it, by the message. I enjoyed the performances, just everything about it worked. And best of luck on the film. And let's get these people to see it.
Thanks so much, Jim. We really appreciate the support.
Hey.
Welcome to Grace Point.